I honestly don't know if there's been a more anticipated TV battle than this one. Today we've got the TCL QM8K and the Hisense U8QG. What could possibly happen? A lot, as it turns out. Welcome back to CalebRated, everyone. I am Caleb, and we have a lot to get through, so I'm not going to waste your time. Let's figure out which TV would be the better choice for you, the TCL QM8K or the Hisense U8G, and I think we dive right into it by starting with the form factor. It's a TV. Not to be glib, but we are talking about a fairly thin bezel. We've got a little metal border on both TVs. It's a little bit thicker on the TCL than the Hisense. Centralized pedestal stands that you can actually set up with two different heights. So if you need to accommodate a sound bar, you can place it a little bit higher, or for a stealthier look, place it down low. Neither are particularly slim TVs. These both have pretty elaborate mini LED backlight systems built into them, and so getting a super thin TV should not be part of your plans if you're looking at something this high performance. That said, we do have a lot of space for speakers, and as you can see, some bass transducers or subwoofers, if you want, on the back of the TV, and we'll talk about the audio in a little bit. Let's move on to the remotes, and let's start with the fact that both remotes are backlit, so instantly I'm happy with either one. I do have to say though that I prefer TCL's remote here by a little bit. It's a little more compact, still has all the buttons I need, it's just a cleaner look. One thing that I do prefer on the Hisense remote though is that we have a total of 6 hotkeys, and while I don't care a whole lot about Tubi, I like that I can actually assign one. That's what this little heart and plus sign is all about. I can assign a streaming service of my choice to this hotkey. And I think that's a really awesome move by Hisense, because typically streaming services have paid for placement on remotes like that. Here's one thing that definitely separates these TVs though, the inputs and outputs, or I/O for short. The TCL has 4 HDMI inputs. 2 are 2.0 and 2 are HDMI 2.1 for taking advantage of higher refresh rate signals from game consoles and gaming PCs. Now the eARC port uses one of the 2.0 slots, and that's going to make folks who use their TV as a switching hub for other components very pleased, while those who use an AV receiver as a switching hub, especially for gaming, are going to be a little bit frustrated. The Hisense TV, on the other hand, has 3 HDMI 2.1 ports. That is not normal, but also not normal is that it has a USB-C display port, which supports up to 144 Hertz and HDR, but no variable refresh rate, which may be a limitation of its implementation here, but that's not exactly fulfilling the dreams of the high-end gaming PC folks who have been crying for DisplayPort on a TV for ages. I will say though, it makes connecting a laptop a piece of cake, and I kind of like that. I'm not sure who the target audience is for this USB-C port, but I'll just say, if you like the idea of connecting your modern laptop to your TV like instantly, this will definitely do it. And if handheld gaming devices follow suit with the USB-C output, well, it's starting to look a whole lot more attractive. So which one wins? Well, I'll give a personal nod to Hisense here, but I guess that since it comes down to your personal needs, I'll professionally say that it's a draw. Get used to that because it's gonna be a thing in this video. Now let's dig into the user interface a little bit. Both TVs run Google TV, and I wish I'd pointed this out in my U8QG review, but just like the TCL QM8K, the Hisense offers a custom settings ribbon. I just didn't know that's what the menu button way down on the bottom of the remote was for. Now, I was gonna give TCL the advantage for having that ribbon, but I guess they both have it. I will say though that the TCL feels a little bit more polished and customized, whereas the Hisense feels a bit more stock Google TV. But the Hisense has some enthusiast treats hiding in the settings section, and I love that the TV tells you what signal you're getting when you tune in. TCL does have Google's Gemini AI assistant implemented now. They're the only one. So if you're into that, there's a lot of fun and utility to be had, but I'm not gonna dwell on that feature too much since I mostly hear from viewers that they don't want AI assistants in their TV, but I mean, the robot overlords are here, so I kind of think this is a fun feature. I'm personally going to give the nod to TCL here, but professionally, still a draw. Get whichever one you prefer. Now for the sound, and this section is a little more cut and dry for me, and it's going to be a contrarian take because I've heard reviewers and viewers alike tell me that they prefer the Hisense. But from a sound tuning perspective, I prefer the TCL in this particular battle. I don't think TCL TVs universally sound better than Hisense TVs, but in this particular combination right here in this room, the TCL sounds more well-rounded and less grating on my ears than the Hisense. And not just in this position either. I tried both in multiple rooms and in various locations in this room. So for me, the sound category goes to TCL. But like I said, others have very different opinions. As for gaming, both have a game bar built in. The Hisense can do 165 Hertz, the TCL can do 144 Hertz. If we left it just to input lag, I'd call it a draw. Although according to ratings, the input lag on the TCL is slightly lower in most measurements. For me though, it comes down to picture quality in game mode. And well, what do you think? It looks super tight to me. I will say though that the QM8G yields its HDR tone mapping to the Xbox better because you can turn dynamic tone mapping off. And at that point, it's essentially HGIG compliant. Whereas it appears the Hisense is constantly imposing a static HDR tone curve. Honestly, both TVs look rad, but maybe a slight hat tip to the TCL here. Okay, let's talk really practical stuff. Screen sizes and cost. The TCL QM8K is available at 65, 75, 85, and 98 inches. So if you're looking for a 55-inch TV, the debate's over. You need to go to Hisense. Hisense, on the other hand, offers 55, 65, 75, 85, and 100-inch screen sizes, although that 100 doesn't look a whole lot larger in reality than TCL's 98. They are both massive. Now, this isn't confirmed, but word is that Hisense is using different panels in some screen sizes. So the 55, 75, and 100-inch models use ADS Pro, which has a slightly better off-angle performance, while the 65 and 85-inch models use a VA panel, which suffers a little more off-angle. Now, Hisense is currently coming in a little less expensive than TCL. At the 65-inch size, the Hisense U8QG is currently $200 less than the 65-inch QM8K. That can and probably will change in an instant though. Probably the second this video goes out, right? But if we back up a little bit, we like TCL for its WHVA panel, but no 55-inch option, while we like the Hisense for its broader selection of screen sizes, but varying panel types depending on screen size. So until the prices balance out, advantage Hisense. Oh, and I almost forgot. The Hisense shows slightly less rainbow around bright objects with its anti-glare treatment. So another reason it slightly pulls ahead on the panel implementation. Now, for the part a lot of you have been waiting for, the picture quality. I would argue that there's a lot more to a TV than picture quality, but I think everybody really wants to know how these two stack up in the picture quality department. So let's start with this screensaver you may know from your Apple TV in Dolby Vision. Now, when both sets are in the default Dolby Vision Dark, I reset them both, the TCL QM8K has clearly brighter highlights and it appears to have better dark areas. At least they look darker, a little more rich. It just looks more contrasty in the dark areas of these buildings. However, if you take a closer look, what you'll notice is that there's less detail in those dark areas. For example, I can make out what the top of this building looks like on the Hisense, whereas it's too dark to tell what's going on with the TCL. The colors have a bit more zing on the TCL as well. So it isn't just the bright colors, even the meaty primaries pop out just a bit more on the TCL, at least in this scene. Now, if we switch to Dolby Vision IQ mode, we'll notice that the TCL's brightness advantage has pretty much gone away. The Hisense is clearly matched up in raw brightness capabilities. So really, processing and setup will decide what your experience is like. But matched up in those default settings, the TCL will be a bit brighter in the bright areas, but crush the dark areas a bit in Dolby Vision Dark. but it's gonna have a more contrasty picture compared to the Hisense. In Dolby Vision IQ mode, the two are equally matched, though I do feel the Hisense imparts a better sense of detail, the difference in screen size notwithstanding. And we see that trend continue as we go into higher luminance Dolby Vision material. Here we have Jennifer Galla's demo material mastered at 1,000, 2,000, 4,000, and 10,000 nits. And you can buy this from her via Patreon, by the way. And what you're gonna see here is that the TCL in general is pushing a brighter overall picture in Dolby Vision dark mode, whereas the Hisense reins it in a little bit. But if we switch to Dolby Vision IQ, we notice the Hisense now chooses to punch the brightness up quite a bit. The TCL is darkening dim areas a little. Fine detail seems about the same between the two with this material. Now we switch to regular HDR, and we'll do so on YouTube. Both are in their filmmaker mode, and I'm gonna use the title, The Most Quiet Place on Earth from the 8K Vision channel. And guys, it's on this content here that I decided these two TVs are definitely in a dead heat when they're fed decent quality content. There are tiny little differences between the two, but it takes an eagle eye to find them. Most folks looking at these two TVs would be hard pressed to see any differences, even given a generous amount of time to do so. So far we have minor differences in Dolby Vision depending on the setting. We have almost no difference at all between the two with HDR10 and HLG content, at least in the filmmaker mode. Now let's check out a 4K non-HDR signal from Netflix, and I'll use the blacklist. And again, I mean, it's dead even here. I'm noticing the slightest green cast in the whites on the TCL, almost like they're trying to mimic OLED. But that's easy to take out in a 2-point white balance calibration, and you can't see it without a reference point. Honestly, I'm only mentioning it because it makes me sound like an expert who knows what they're talking about and instills some confidence in you. Doesn't hurt that it's also 100% true. Anyway, back to the TVs. And you know, sometimes I'm getting slightly richer colors off the Hisense. It's marginal at best though. I'm not sure you'd agree with me if you were sitting right here checking it out together in person though. You know, I do feel like there's a heightened sense of texture in this man's white suit on the Hisense. Like there's a pixel level darkening that we're not seeing on the TCL, but honestly, this is the first time I've seen something like that. Man, I'm really picking nits here. And honestly, I'm starting to wonder if there are any meaningful differences between these TVs in the picture quality section. There are, but I'll get to that in a moment. First, let's get off the Apple TV and onto the Magnetar UHD disc player. And you know what that means. I'm pulling out Mad Max, right? Except where I'm usually showing you the flames, I'm actually more excited to show you something else. Okay, first the flames. And look, again, we're in the default filmmaker mode. If there's a meaningful difference in the brightness of these flames, you would have to pause to see it. Okay, so the Hisense is punching a little harder here, just barely. I'm seeing a bit more definition in the flame, but I think that's the pixel aperture difference. I can't call the Hisense for being notably brighter here, but it definitely maintains color saturation a little bit better. No obvious signs for clipping from either TV though. Now here's what I really wanted to show you. Here's where brightness power actually pays off. Not just in the average picture level brightness, but in the specular highlights. Look at the glint in the eyes. That is powerful here in person. That really catches my eye. That's dazzle that I haven't seen before. Maybe the LG G5 can pull off this intensity, maybe, but hard to imagine anything being better here. Of course, for sheer firepower, I don't think there's anything mastered higher than this scene from Mad Max Fury Road. The lightning storm, forget about it. If you're supposed to be as blinded as they were, mission accomplished from both TVs, and neither are aggressively clipping either. Look at this little hidden 2-frame section that Classy Tech Calibration showed me. If you look here in the window, you should see a reflection of the driver here. Usually this is just a bright mass, but both TVs are showing the bright reflection. I think that's pretty awesome. All right, come on. There's got to be something that one TV does conclusively better than the other, right? Well, Yes, actually, Hisense's cleanup of macro blocking is noticeably better. Check out this video from the Cocoa Butter channel. You can see here that with the gradation smoothing turned up on both TVs, the Hisense is cleaning up the macro blocking in the color transitions better than the TCL, with no obvious ill effect, at least not in this video. And that, my friends, is something that's gonna pay off if you watch a lot of SDR YouTube content. Okay, so that's one thing, but there's gotta be something else, right? Well, let's take a still frame and just run through the picture modes. Okay, so listen, y'all are not allowed to get mad at me here because in the end, you win. You just win because both of these TVs exist at the price at which they exist. It is unreal to me that you can get picture quality like this at this price. I'm gonna quote my friend Classy here because I totally agree with him. TCL is out here looking like the new Samsung with its higher APL and dazzling highlights and limited blooming and halo, albeit slightly lost detail in super dark patches, while Hisense is out here looking a lot like Sony with its approach. Look, we talk a lot about the reference standard. Sony has kind of owned that for a while, and I feel Samsung and LG challenge Sony in many, many ways now. The absolute standard as determined by professionals, the prosumer standard. But when it comes to the consumer standard, your standard, these TVs are where it is at. Is it a toss a coin decision here? No. Go back and watch this video again, and next time think about which quirks you think you're most comfortable living with. That's a very personal decision that is not served by my calling an arbitrary winner. And trust me, if one TV was conclusively ahead of the other, I'd call it. I've done it before and you'll hear me do it in the future. But in this particular case, you just can't make a wrong decision. You know who else is probably frustrated by that takeaway? TCL and Hisense. I'm sure they'd like me to crown a winner. And honestly, I'd probably be able to sell some licensing if I did, but I won't because it's just too close. Like I said though, in the end, you're the winner. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Check out these other two videos. Take care. Anticipated TV battle, that was right. Why did I stop?